be growing and trading and doing awesome. And we're going to see there are going to be some similarities between both of these locations as opposed to them being very different. So first off, we know that they were definitely planned. We know that they're planned because they're organized. They have similarities. And because there are some communities that they just grow and grow and grow, and we can see that they weren't planned out very well. For example, if anybody's ever been to New York City or Boston or many of the cities in the Northeast, they just kind of kept growing and growing. And so when you go in there, the roads, they don't make any sense. Where stuff is doesn't really make any sense. Whereas these cities were planned out from the beginning. They all were protected by fortresses, so big stone structures to give them defenses. We see that their streets were paved with bricks, so they had paved streets. This is, 4,000 years ago. It's pretty incredible. They crossed at right angles, so they have a bit of a grid system going on. So once again, showing the organization. They had storehouses, which you might be like, okay, what does that matter? Well, it means that they knew that there are going to be times they have plenty and times they don't. So they would keep extra food that they grew. We see they had workshops, market stalls, houses, public wells. There's some talks about how some of these places, and this is going to be amazing, I know you won't think it's amazing, may have even had potties in their housing, which you might say, we all have potties, but guess what? There are places in the United States that still don't have indoor plumbing. If you go to the Appalachia, it's crazy. Yeah. You don't want to go to an outhouse, especially not in the wintertime. Woo! Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty incredible, actually, just how advanced these old cities were. So the big thing you want to make sure you're getting from this spot here is the idea of how these cities were planned and how they had all of these relatively modern kind of ideas with it, that they were protected, they had brick streets, public wells. Now we're going to see some artist renditions of what we believe, and we'll also see some pictures of some of the ruins as well coming up. Now there's a lot here, so hopefully you're going and condensing it, shortening it, because I do want to keep moving. I have a feeling we're not going to get as many slides done as I had planned, and that's okay though. That's okay. Okay. Now, what you need to realize here, and you can shorten it, but you could see that the people traded with Iran. We think they even might have traded with Mesopotamia. In fact, we know they did because we have evidence. So you could say that there was trade with neighboring kingdoms. Because if you remember, when you guys were going and doing your maps, not only do you have like the Hindu Kush mountains over yonder, but then you also have things like deserts in between as well. So you need to have in here that they traded long distances or traded with neighbors, things like that, okay? That's how I would shorten that spot right there. Here we see a lot of artifacts that we have here. What can we learn by looking at what they left behind, particularly these two items? What can we learn from looking at these two items? All right, Maddox, start us off, sir. Can you speak a little louder? Sorry, sir. The mask makes it just harder for me to hear you. Okay, so Maddox thinks maybe that's a trophy or something. Yeah, it probably is just a statue representing, but who knows? Maybe it was a trophy. I know people today get trophies looking like that. Yes, Kirthana, what can we learn from? Ooh, I don't know how we did that. There we go. Ah! And carts. Yeah. So we know that they definitely had the wheel because they have this wheel on this toy. Now, probably this was like a duck or something like that. Yeah. Maybe not a carriage, but they definitely use the wheel, which means they probably use carts to be able to transport things. You know, I'm thinking, Mr. Kenny, that the wheel is so like obvious. Everybody uses that. Well, I just finished teaching my 6th graders about a civilization that ended in 1534 in South America that did not use the wheel, and a civilization that was in the Americas in present-day Mexico, the Aztecs, that ended in 12 something that did not use the wheel. So let's not take for granted what there is. All right. What else can we learn? Yeah, from that toy, we can see that they had the wheel because they put a wheel on the toy, and we can know, okay, these people had the wheel. What can we learn about the statue here? Man, I don't have a lot of volunteers today. This is kind of sad. Danielle? Okay, we can see that they're talented artisans. I mean, you can clearly tell that this is a person. You can see a lot of details in it, so that they were good artists. Good. Maddox? Again. Sorry. Okay. Kirthana can tell that dancing was probably important to their culture if they're making these things. We can tell that the climate was probably warm for them because the dancer is not wearing too much in the line of clothing. We can see some of the jewelry that they would wear, things like that, how they kept their hair, ideas of how they saw themselves, things like that. So there's a lot we can learn just from looking at these two little objects. Here's just showing an example of what Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro looked like. But no, they definitely did dance, and dancing is still actually. I had some people that I taught that did some traditional Indian dancing. It was awesome that they still did it. Here we see a Harappan priest king. What can we learn from looking at this? Very cool, Kirthana. What can we learn from looking at this statue? What do you think, Kadir? What could we learn about them just by looking at this statue? What do you see about that guy? You don't know? Riley says an old statue. Well, it is an old statue, but you can look at their clothing. What does their clothing say about this person? How do we know that this is probably a priest king just by taking a look? I don't want it to be the Megamatics show. I mean, it'd be a good show. People would watch it, but I got to get more than just Megamatics. Where are you getting that from, Riley? The shirt? Oh, I guess it does kind of look like a peace symbol a little bit. I would say it's probably not a peace symbol. Alexander, how do you know this guy looking at him that he's probably a priest king or important? Eliza says he has fancy clothes. Alex says the clothing. Yeah, look at it. I mean, you're not going to have clothes like this fancy with it. What do you want to add, Ivan? They made a statue of him. Yeah, just the fact that they made a statue of him shows that he's probably important. Riley says the headband. Yeah, look at this thing. This is probably on there going to have some. This is probably a part that's metal or fancy, things like that. Okay, Megamatics. Yeah. Yeah, Maddox noticed the clothing. You noticed the armband right there, Kirthana. The headband and the armband. Okay, yeah, you saw the armband too. Yeah, so definitely. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh, that's okay. That's fine. You can just add that they also probably traded with Mesopotamia, Sumer. I should probably put. I think these slides are out of order. I think that's part of the problem. Oops. That should have been right after the other one. I was like, what? So Mohenjo-Daro traded with Sumer. That's all I have to say. Mohenjo-Daro traded with Sumer. And look about how, this is the area that they were probably trading in this green area. That's a huge amount of land. Because remember, they have their feet. They have what they can travel on an animal. They don't have cars. They don't have planes. They don't have helicopters. They don't have teleporters. They don't have computers to have this communication or anything like that. So imagine how kind of scary that might be for some of the first people. Jason going out and being like, well, I hear there's people in this direction. and he just goes. Like, it's not like today where Jason could just hop on the road and drive down and be like, all right, I'm driving south. I'm on 15 south, 270 south. All right, now guess what? I'm in Germantown. I'm in Gaithersburg. I can go to these places. He doesn't have that. It's like Jason's just going out and being like, I heard people were to the west. And he crosses deserts through the cold, through the heat, through the lack of water, through the tons of water with rain. And eventually like, oh, look, there's a civilization here. I mean, just kind of amazing. So here's what we believe Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro look like. Oh, gosh golly, keep on doing that. I apologize. So what strikes you about this scene? What do you see about this place that seems that interests you or that seems cool? Ivan, sir? How the houses are matching? Yeah, it's kind of like townhouses, how they're connected together like that. Very cool. So I haven't noticed how a lot of the buildings are connected. Good. All right, Kadir, sir. Yeah, we've got animals pulling the cart. So we see first off, the streets were wide enough for like people and these carts to be going through. Once again, we see that, yeah, they definitely used carts and the wheel and things. Good. Shania, my dear.
They have like people have like markets in front of the building.
They're good. Yeah, we got markets going on there. Kirthanis is working on the roof. Yeah. So we see the roofs were flat, and they're going to have a drainage system for that monsoon season. And they're going to have markets on the roofs, below the roofs. I mean, it's pretty cool. We can see they've got the wall, the fortress around it to protect it. It's pretty cool. People would often live in the second story, so we see that they've got these beautiful staircases. It's pretty cool. Now, none of these places were united, but they had a common language and culture. What is that called when you have all of these cities and they're not united, so they have their own kings, their own rulers, but they share a common language, a common culture? What is that term that we use to describe this? Eliza's got it. What do you say? Kadir. What did he say? Was that what you're going to say, Ivan? All right, yeah. Eliza, Ivan, and Kadir say city-states, and hopefully Kirthana was too. Yeah, they're city-states. So what is this similar to, Kirthana? What place have we studied that it's like?
Greece.
Greece, very good. What other places is similar to that we studied? So we talked about a lot of places actually that started as city-states. Think back to the beginning of the what? Sumer. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, Mesopotamia, Kirthana says. So yeah, this is similar to Greece, to gosh golly, to the Greece to Sumer. So they are city-states. All right. So you could say that Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, they were city-states, or the Indus Valley civilization was a collection of city-states. All right, and here are some of the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro today. This right here is a very special place. Very special. We'll talk about it in a second. It is called the Great Bath. Now, this right here would have basically been a giant swimming pool. All right. And yep, historians have given it the very, very fancy name, the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro. And with that, we think probably this was used for religious purposes, maybe for like ritual, like cleaning. Maddox, let's not try to get too far ahead, broski, or I will not post it anymore. Thanks. All right. So I appreciate your vigor you wanted, but I want you to make sure you're listening too, okay? Thank you, sir. Here we see an ancient potty. Doesn't that look comfy, folks? But hey, it's better than your pee-pee and poo-poo staying around with you. But yeah, so they had latrines, which are basically ditches going, and they would go and make it so those things kind of go away. It's good. Here you see the ruins of a granary. A granary is where they would store their extra food so that they would have enough and everything they need. This is a big thing that you want to write down. Poor Maddox has been wanting to get to this point for so long because he's already been there. They develop a writing system. This is a big deal. a super duper big deal. You need to know one of the achievements of the Indus Valley civilization is they figured out writing. Not that many places in the world figured out writing on their own. They did. All right, so you got to know that they invented a writing system. Now they use these. These are really cool. Trade seals. Now, these trade seals, you just need to have the idea. You don't have to write all of this down right here. But what they would do with these trade seals is basically, most people didn't know how to read and write. This is just like Mesopotamia, just like Egypt, all right? They didn't know how to read and write. So Kadir, he's a businessman. He likes to make lots and lots of money. But he, because he's a businessman, never actually learned how to read or write, because most people didn't. So what Kadir would do, in his pocket, he would carry a little cylinder, all right? A little circle kind of thing. I have one. So now, it wouldn't be smooth like what I have right here, but this is the idea. This is the kind of size it would be, a little cylinder. And embossed on it, meaning going up on it, would be an image that represents Kadir. I don't know, what would represent you, Kadir? Okay, so like a goldfish. Perfect. I'm kidding, dude. A ferocious lion. All right, so it would have a ferocious lion to represent Kadir and his family. And then it would have some Sanskrit on it, which would be the writing right over here. And basically what would happen is when Kadir makes a sale, he would go push into clay and roll it around. And when it's all flattened out, it would look, you know, something like these kind of things right here. And that's kind of like how they would do a receipt. This is how they would do the trade. It might show on there that Kadir wound up trading, you know, 50 sheep for, I don't know, a couple cans of Pringles, right? All right. Here's what they look like for them. Not quite, you know, obviously they wouldn't be a metal guitar slide, but you know. All right. You don't have to go and write anything here, but this is kind of cool how like it had a movable head, this animal, toy cow. We can see a lot of toys. That means that they definitely valued their kids, because, you know, the Spartans, you know, you wouldn't find any toys or anything for those kids. So it's kind of cool that we find a lot of toys that they had. More jewelry. You don't have to write anything here, but we could see that they're pretty awesome craftsmen. You need to write this down. They had the wheel. This is a big deal. You know, we find a lot of models because obviously, you know, Jason isn't going to go digging in Harappa and find an old wooden wheel because those are going to rot. But he finds lots of clay carts and things like that, like little toys that the kids would play with. So you need to write that they had the wheel. I know we don't think it's a big deal, but back then, figuring that out was huge. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, we are impacted by the wheel every day. Even those of you who are staying at home saying, I haven't gone anywhere in weeks. Well, guess what? You're still impacted by the wheel, because the clothing you wore, guess what? Transported because of a wheel. The food you eat, transported because of a wheel. You know, it happens. Here is a humongous thing. Standardized weights and measures. They found all of these little cubes in MohenjoDaro. And people were like, what do all these cubes mean? And then they realized, they're all similar sizes. They're all the same weight. And that's how people would do trading. Think about it. How many of you guys have ever followed a recipe? Perhaps baking chocolate chip cookies for your favorite 5th grade history teacher? Which, you know, hint, hint. I'm kidding. So yeah, you followed recipes. Now imagine, what happens if you don't follow a recipe very well? What happens, kid here? The cookies might not taste good. They might not even turn out at all. You know, does that happen to anybody? I know it hasn't happened. It's happened to me, definitely. Yeah, I've made some pretty nasty things before. Imagine how hard it would be if you looked at a recipe and it was just like, put in some flour, put in some sugar, Yeah, it gets burnt, spoiled, doesn't taste good. Thank you, Kirthana. Yeah. So this meant that when Maddox goes to the store and is like, I would like, a pound of flour, he gets exactly a pound of flour. This also meant that Maddox pays the same amount for the same amount of product. So it's not like, well, Ivan comes and then he gets a little bit more or a little bit less, or then, Michael comes, gets more or less. Everything is the same. This is a big, big deal. And most civilizations will not figure this out for a long time. All right. All right. And they're the first civilization to make cotton. And this is actually going to make India super duper rich, because cotton, if you were unaware, is very comfortable, especially compared to things like wool. It's way cooler too. Imagine if, like, when it gets summertime, all your clothing is wool. You'd be itchy and you would be hot. Whereas cotton is comfy and cool. And they're the first people to use it. And for a long time, they are like the monopoly on cotton, meaning they're the only people producing it. So it's going to make India super duper rich. And congratulations, lady. We finally have a matrilineal society, meaning girls, we think, had significant power. They would have priest kings, but the ladies would have a lot of power, and they would trace descent from their mother's line. Unfortunately for you ladies, this will change as soon as the Aryans come. Almost done with our notes today. We've got one more slide. So a matrilineal society. I had mentioned this before. I think some of my slides are out of order because this should be going with the other pictures. That's really weird. They had sewer systems, so your pee-pee and poo-poo go away. And we have, of course, once again, our great bath again. We think cleanliness is going to be very important, which is going to be kind of interesting because a lot of civilizations at the time are not going to be very clean. And that, my cherubs, is our notes for the day. So thank you very much. I'm stopping my recording. Does anyone have questions or comments about what we've studied thus far?